How do we get more volunteers? And then how do we set them up for success while also doing student leadership well and keeping ourselves from burning out? On this episode of Student Ministry Connection, I'm talking with Doug Franklin about all things leadership. Let's get ready to connect and grow. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection. My name is Steve Cullum. And on top of serving in student ministry since around 1999, I also serve with National Network of Youth Ministries. And I'm so excited that you're here today because today we are talking with one of the wisest youth leaders I know. Doug Franklin is the founder and president of LeaderTreks, an organization that uses trips, training, and curriculum to help student ministries, specifically in the areas of discipleship and leadership. After many years of being a youth pastor himself, Doug started LeaderTreks in 1994 to help with leadership development, and it's grown to be an amazing resource for youth leaders today. I've been a huge fan of Doug and LeaderTreks for a long time, and I'm so excited to share with you a recent conversation we had about all things leadership, including adult volunteers, student leaders, and ourselves. Let's jump right in. Well, hey, Doug, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, Steve, happy to be here.
It's been a privilege of mine to get to know you over the years. At the very beginning, you were a person behind LeaderTreks resources and heard you at a training one time, but to all these years later to now call you a friend and partner in ministry. You're such a blessing to me, but also the youth ministry world. But I'd love to just start off with your testimony. Like, how did you end up meeting Jesus in the beginning? How'd you get started in ministry?
Yeah. I grew up in a great Christian family. At the age of 5, my brother told me, "You don't want to go to hell, so say these words." And so I prayed a prayer. That night, my mom was tucking me into bed. I remember this vividly. And my mom said, "How was your day?" And I said, "Oh, it's great. I prayed to accept Christ today." And my mom was like, "Wait, what? No, that's not right. Pray with me." So I prayed with my mom, and she wrote it in her Bible. So I'm
Nice.
double covered. I'm double good. So as you can see, I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois, right by Wheaton College. My grandparents had gone to Wheaton. My parents had gone to Wheaton. My grandparents were missionaries. Everybody in my family was a missionary. So I just had this great legacy of faith, and I grew up at a great church. I had a great youth pastor. I had a great small group leader. And so I got to go to private Christian school. My parents were really big on that. And so I sometimes say I'm a professional Christian. I feel like that sometimes. But when I was 16 years old, I heard God whisper my name. And I had this encounter with him where it became personal. I began to own my own faith. I began to ask myself, okay, if this is my faith, what does that mean to me? I began to think really differently about it. And my dad was really big on too much that is given, much is required. And so he really pressed me on the fact that I had been given a lot and that there was a lot required of me. And my brother as well too. And so my brother is a missionary in the mountains of Appalachia today. He's been there, he's about to retire. He's been there for, I don't know, forever. And he's pastor of a small church and works in a ministry in schools. And so this was a big part of our lives with this idea. My cousins, I'm still very close with many of my cousins who are all in ministry, who all had the same experience. So we're a little bit of a weird family that way wise, but it's also a great legacy. And it was a great growing up. You know, I always tell people I'm a 6 a.m. worker, you know, the parable in the Bible about the different workers, the 6 a.m., the 9, the 12, the 3, and the 5. I'm a 6 a.m. worker. I went into the field early, and that's a great legacy. And I know that from what God's word says, I know that the key for me is to not grumble about the long, hot days, especially the long, hot days right now, and to persevere and to serve God through all of these circumstances. And it's a great joy for me. I love it. I love serving the Lord. I love the fact that I chose this route for life. And so for me, it's been a lot of fun. So no prison time, no drug stories, I got nothing, Steve. I'm just a good kid. I'm a good kid.
Good. I was too. And I remember my youth pastor, I'm so thankful that he pulled me aside one day because I was kind of, you hear all these, to hell and back stories, and they're awesome. I'm glad that God does that. But I was like, I don't have a story like that. And he's like, no, your story is still important. Like the fact that, you can make it through your teenage years without, getting thrown in jail and getting addicted to drugs and everything else. And like people need to hear that. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that too. But yeah, people need to hear those other stories to go, actually, you can do the good things.
Right. You can make the right choices and
Yeah,
still have just great joy and excitement in life. So yeah, it's been a great legacy for me.
that's awesome. So I'm very familiar with leader treks, but I'm sure there might be some people who are listening that maybe still have not heard of it. So how would you describe leader treks? Because I know it's evolved and changed over the years a little bit, and it
Yeah.
kind of started out one way and has kind of grown since then. So how would you describe it, and how did it all begin?
Yeah. Our mission is to develop leaders to fulfill the Great Commission. We do that in three ways: mission trips, training events, and curriculum. We started off as a missions trip organization. We wanted to teach students leadership development. And I was looking for a way to do that. And I thought standing on a whiteboard is never going to work for me. And it's never going to work for students either and talking. So I came up with this idea that we could take a missions trip and turn every aspect of the trip into a leadership lab, from the kitchen to the VBS to the work project to cleaning to travel, everything, the bank, how we spent money could be a leadership lab. And so we started off down that road in 1994, 33 years ago or so, if I do my math right. And after a while, a lot of youth pastors started saying, okay, this is great, Doug. I love this. What should I do this fall? And my response was, sign up for next summer. And they were like, no, we got to keep it going with our students. So we decided that we would start making curriculum. And we started by writing leadership assessments. We partnered with Dr. Jim Galvin, who at the time was the vice president of Youth for Christ leadership development side of things. And you might also know him from your New Living Translation Bible. He's the study Bible. He's the editor of it. Just a brilliant guy. Was served on the Bush Faith-Based Initiative, if you remember those days. But he worked with us, and we wrote 7 leadership assessments. We tested them all over North America. They're really accurate. They're biblically based, written in students' language. And they became the backbone of our curriculum. And then we started writing discipleship material and lessons and all kinds of stuff. And while all this was going on, Campus Crusade, now Cru, came calling and asked us if we would train their staff around the world, especially in Latin America. And I said, that's awesome, but we don't do that. I've never led a training before. So they really pressed us and said, hey, we'd really love for you to do it. We love your material. We'd love for you to do this. And so we ran our first training event in Bolivia. And I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes and learned a ton. And they asked us to sign a 10-year agreement with them where we would travel and train their staff. And we did that. And boy, we learned a lot. And it really helped me in my training and how I thought about training and how much time you use and how much interactive tools you use, because we're experiential. We want to do it. You can't become a leader by just learning the principles. You also have to have experiences. That's why I say principles plus experiences, leadership development. And so I learned all of that through that process. And Leader Treks has really just grown over the years more and more. And so I call us sometimes the best kept secret in youth ministry, but we're not that well kept anymore. I think like 30,000 youth pastors downloaded something from us last year on our website. And so, we've grown now to the point where I think a lot of folks will turn to us for leadership development and discipleship material, because they go hand in hand, Steve, as you know so well. And so that's what we're focused on. I like to say that we help youth pastors make disciples and develop leaders. And we kind of come alongside of what they're doing. They know their students better than us. They know what their students need. And we try to create resources and tools and training events that help them have more impact. And that's pretty much simply us in a nutshell there.
That's cool. Yeah, there still are some youth pastors out there, which is partly the reason why I wanted to come on today, because I think a lot of times you guys are the best kept secret. But yeah, like I'll see student pastors all the time like, oh, what do you guys do for student leadership? I'm like, have you checked out Leader Treks yet? Because it's a fantastic resource. Like, you're going to find 90% of your answers right there.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate that. And we appreciate that trust, because we realize that serving youth workers is an important call. A lot of times a youth pastor gets hired because they're great with students, right? But they didn't take a class on leadership development or on discipleship for that matter, or didn't get a chance to go to seminary. And so parachurch organizations like ours and NNYM, we come alongside of them and we serve them. And, oftentimes their churches don't have the resources or the time to continue their training and to help them grow. So we're here to do that. And that's what we love, is coming alongside a youth worker and really helping them accomplish what God has called them to do.
Yeah. Well, we definitely appreciate that. So let's jump into some leadership stuff. I'd love to start talking about volunteers, because I know many leaders, like youth pastors especially, we struggle with getting volunteers, or then sometimes knowing what to do with those volunteers once we get them. So what advice do you have for leaders who find themselves in that setting?
Yeah. Let's talk recruitment for a minute, because recruitment is really difficult. And standing up and giving an announcement at church just doesn't work, as we all know. There's a couple of things. One is I encourage every youth worker I know to have a place in the church lobby or narthex, if it's an older church, where they put up a little flag at a table and say youth ministry, and they get to know everybody at their church, because you don't want to volunteer you don't know. You want to know every volunteer. And it's also a place where students can come and parents can come and ask questions, but it's making the youth ministry seen. I think that's always the number one thing to recruitment, is to get to know as many people as you can at church. That's the big one. I think the second thing is how we talk about the youth ministry. I love to ask youth pastors, tell me something that God has done in the last 2 weeks in your ministry that's spectacular. And then they tell me these stories about how God has rescued a student, or how Jesus has become a real to a student that was going through a difficult situation, or these stories, right? Mm-hmm. And then I always like to ask, how many people in your church know this? And oftentimes they're like, oh, I haven't told anybody. That's a problem for us. That's a recruitment problem for us. So one of the things that I like to talk to youth pastors about is having a good 30-second answer to, how's the youth ministry going? And I always like to say the mission. So our mission is developing leaders to fulfill the Great Commission. This week, I had a chance to be on a great podcast with Steve Cullen, my friend from NNYM, and we got to talk youth ministry, encourage youth pastors. Hey, would you pray for the ministry of NNYM? 3 things I did there. I said the mission, I said a story of transformation, and I said a way they can be involved. I think if youth pastors did that every time they were asked, how's the youth ministry, they would change the perception of the youth ministry at a church. And I think they would clarify that they have a mission, that God is at work in the mission, and that there's a way for everybody to be involved. If it's prayer, if it's volunteering, if it's helping to pay some of the expenses, whatever it might be. And so I think how we talk about the ministry is important. If we find that we're spending our time complaining about the church, the worship, the senior pastor, how money is spent, I think it is going to put off a negative vibe about the youth ministry. But if we talk about what God's doing, the youth ministry is going to be the most exciting place at the church. And that's what it should be, because almost every great change in church today has come out of youth ministry. The worship movement, the seeker sensitive way of looking at people and being sensitive to new people that are coming in. I mean, all of that is coming out of youth ministry. That's all 40 years ago in youth ministry, right? And so we are change agents in youth ministry, but I think we got to start acting like it. We got to stop complaining about what we don't control. And we got to start talking about what God's doing. I think that's an incredible way to recruit. One more way I think about recruiting that I think makes it really great is, don't just have one job at your youth ministry that volunteers can do, because volunteers are all different. So I like to think about five categories roughly. I like to think about a small group leader. I like to think about a logistical, somebody could help with admin. I like to think about creative arts. I like to think about somebody that would help with leadership development with students. I like to think about somebody that might like to mentor. They might be 1 or 2 students at a time type person. But these are 5 very different roles. And when you're looking for people with more than one job description, more than one role, you're gonna expand the number of people that can be involved in the youth ministry. So I like to really think about recruiting not just one type of person for a youth group, but to recruit people with different gifts, different abilities, and different ways that they want to serve. And I think you expand the pool then, and you can have more people involved. So that's my recruitment idea. When it comes to training volunteers, I like simplicity. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. So I only train on three things when I train my adult volunteers in the ministries that I've served in. I train them on inviting. I want to train my adult volunteers to invite. Invite students to know you personally, get to know them, build a relationship with them, right? Know something beyond their face and their facts. Know something about their feelings, fears, and faith. That's what I always like to say. You just kind of get deep with them, right? Second of all is I want to invite them to come back to youth group on a regular basis and say, this is a place for you. This is a place you can belong. And the third thing is I want to train my adults on how to invite them to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. I don't think everybody knows how to do that. And so I want to be able to help my adults be able to do that. So when we're doing midweek youth group, I'm like, hey, you guys got one job tonight, one job only, invite. That's what I want you to do. Build relationships, right? Invite students to come back. And if it's appropriate, invite them to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. You know, when you give your adults one job to do, you know what they're going to do? That one job.
Yeah.
But if they don't know what their job is, or you're changing the purpose of the youth of what you're doing right in the middle of youth group, you're going to confuse your adults. And that tends to make adults move to the side and stand against the wall and talk to themselves. Mm-hmm. And if that's happening in your youth ministry, the problem is not your adults. The problem is that they don't have a purpose because they're there to serve. They want to serve. They want to impact students. So let's let them do it. Give them one thing to do and they'll do it. Second thing I train on is discipleship, how to disciple a student, because that is just not known. We throw that word discipleship around, Steve, like crazy. And I don't know that we actually know what it means. So I teach a process for discipleship, build a meaningful relationship, share your story of redemption. Don't just ask yes and no questions, ask discipleship questions. In other words, get to know what students feel and think, and then help them make Bible life applications. Take the truth of God's word and help them apply it to their life, and then hold them accountable to that. That's a real easy process of discipleship. We call it the discipleship pathway here at Leader Trucks. And it's a real simple tool to be able to use. But when we train adults on how to do it, they'll actually do it. Otherwise, they might just be trying to get through the next 10 minutes with small group. And that will be really ineffective. The third thing I always like to train my adults on is how to build leaders. Leader Trucks, of course, I feel that way. But I want our students to lead now. And I want our adults to treat them like they can lead now. Yeah. Student leaders are church leaders. Yeah. And we're one generation away from being out of leaders in the church. And so developing leaders is a key, but it starts with how our adults view students. If your adults think students can't do anything and need to be coddled and protected, then they're probably not going to grow very much. I always like to say to my student leaders, let's get out there and have a few good failures this week. High five me. Let's go. Come on. Because that means we're taking risks. And if we're taking risks, we're growing. And if we're not taking risks, then we're not growing. And so I want to train my adults on how to do this, how to always show students how to do something and then pass it on to them to do it, and to challenge them. Challenge is one of the strongest tools we have in the spiritual development of our students. And to be honest with you, our adults are a little scared of challenge these days. Yeah. And I think we need to break them out of that, get them the freedom to challenge students, to say to a student, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah.
Right. And letting students make decisions that lead to real consequences, because that's when they'll grow. So those are the three things I would train on. I wouldn't train on a whole lot more. I don't think our adult volunteers have time for a whole lot more. Right. But I would try to get them to do those three things. Build really great relationships with students and invite them. I'd get them to learn how to disciple, whether it's through God's word, through mentoring, through just a relationship. And then I would also teach them how to develop leaders. I think if our adults did that, we'd have dynamic youth ministries.
Yeah. Yeah. Doug, that answer is worth the price of admission right there. I think that there's so much, because like what you said, like if we were recruiting better because we're talking more about the ministry, getting more people excited about the ministry, and then we're doing those three things with our leaders, man, I could only imagine that so many of our student ministries would be drastically changed if that's all we did this next year or so. Just focus on those things. We'll see huge differences.
Our volunteers, they're awesome. They're special. They're great people. And if we can keep it simple and help them do what they feel like God has called them to do, man, we make them effective.
Yeah. Well, you recently wrote an article about the importance of collaboration among volunteers. And so at NNYM, we're, of course, all about collaboration, but we're usually, we often, I think it's misunderstood that we're just talking about, the primary youth pastor and the importance of collaboration there for the overall kingdom. But why is it so important that that's not just the primary youth pastor that focuses on collaboration?
Oh man, how much time do we have? We could talk about this forever.
Good.
Students are all different. I think adult volunteers can really impact 1 to 3 students on a transformational level during the course of a year. Let me say that again. I think an adult volunteer can impact 1 to 3 students on a transformational level in the course of the year. So that means we need a lot of adults. And we need to be able to look at students as individuals. It's not a one size fits all. Not every sophomore boy is exactly the same. They're all very different, and their development is very different, and their spiritual lives are very different. And so different adults are effective with different students. So one, we need adults to work together to get the right adults to work with the right student. That's a big key in my mind. Second of all is a youth ministry can be about one of the most discouraging things in the whole world, because one day your student's on top of the mountain saying, I'm ready to serve you, Lord. And the next minute they're drunk at a party. And you know this roller coaster, right? And we've been on this roller coaster. Jesus knew this roller coaster. Peter was on this roller coaster, right? So, I mean, you need one another to say, hey, it's okay. It's okay. You need a buddy to be able to say, you know what, this is a planting and fertilizing season. And then you need times where people go, hey, it's time to harvest. Get out there, start challenging your students, harvest. We need each other to be able to help in that process. But I also think we need each other for wisdom. Like you might have experienced something that I haven't experienced. And when I share what I'm struggling with or what my students are struggling with, you might have some great insight for me. My first year I was volunteering. I got out of college. I was volunteering as a 7th grade boys small group leader. And one of the other volunteers, Chuck, came to me and said, hey, Doug, why don't you start asking kids if they want to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior? And crazy. My kids' parents are all professors at Wheaton College. I don't think that's, I don't think they're missing that. And he was like, no, challenge your students. And so I started challenging my students. I saw a bunch of kids come to the Lord because Chuck challenged me. And that was just an amazing season, an amazing time to go through. And I'm just so grateful for Chuck challenging me on that. And so, I think we need each other in so many ways. If you're isolated in youth ministry, you're probably just weeks away from a pretty big failure. You cannot be isolated. You got to be in community. You got to be listening to other people. I interact with youth pastors all the time that are going through difficult situations. And the first question I ask is, who's around you?
Yeah.
Because that is a really good indication. And when they say there's nobody, I know they're in big trouble. I know they're in big trouble. So I would say that this isn't hey, this is a good idea to collaborate with others. I would say this is a necessity because there are so many things in ministry that will drown you. And you need somebody that's going to put a life preserver on you and throw you a rope. And you got to have buddies in the boat, because if you don't, you're in trouble. So I don't know how strongly I can say this, but cannot do this alone.
Yeah. So well stated. So let's turn our attention to students, because a lot of our work, is with adult leaders, but also it's primarily, I think, in a lot of ways with students. So what are you seeing in student ministry right now that maybe other leaders might be missing? Because you have a unique opportunity to step in, and you're meeting lots of different youth leaders around the country, sometimes around the world. You have an opportunity to speak and to do trainings and things like that, mission trips. What are you seeing that maybe we're missing?
A couple of things. I've been on the ground a lot this summer with our mission trip teams and seeing students up front. First thing I'm seeing over 50% of our teams are boys. Haven't seen this in 20 years.
Mm.
So boys like crazy are signing up for things that they weren't signing up for 2, 3 years ago. So I think there's a real opportunity to challenge young men in a lot of things, challenge them in their prayer life, challenging them in their behavior and in their language, challenging them to step forward and take the lead. I think we're in a unique spot. I don't know if why that is exactly. You could talk about the Charlie Kirk factor. You could talk about the revivals that are taking place on college campuses. I think there's a lot of reasons for this, but I think young men are attracted right now to serving and to being at church. And let's not waste this time. Let's engage them at a very high level. That's one thing I'm noticing lately. That's very lately. Second thing is the research on the Gen Alpha, they are coming along and they want challenge. They want intentionality. They want focus. They want to have impact. And their leaders are Gen Zs or millennials, some of them older millennials. And that group in youth ministry was a little bit more laid back. Let's see what happens. Let's build relationships. So I'm a little fearful that we're entering a time in youth ministry where the leadership is going to be based on a value of how do you feel?
Hmm.
And the student's value is going to be, let's take the mountain.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering how those two value systems are going to affect youth ministry. And so I think youth pastors probably more than ever before need to look at this generation and how this generation that's in middle school right now is coming into high school. I think we got to take a look at this generation and see how we can respond to them. I know there's been the SBC has a lot of research on this out there. I know other people do as well too. I think this generation coming is way different than the last two generations. And I think we got a lot of work to do. So that's something I think is coming that we got to keep our eye on.
Mm. Yeah, I love hearing that. And I just came back from speaking at an event this last week, and I was telling some of my coworkers earlier today that I've done this for not as long as you, but several years in it. And up until here recently, I've not gotten nearly as much feedback from students themselves. But here recently, they're coming to me and saying, "Hey, I really appreciate when you said this and you challenged me in this way." And they're wanting that, they're longing for it. They're giving me good feedback from when I do it. They're showing their appreciation to it. And like, you're different than the kids that have come before you. Like, and it's exciting, but it's also, I'm noticing like I got to be on my toes, and like we got to be ready for that, because this next generation seems like they're going to challenge us to be challenging them. And I think as youth leaders, we got to be ready for that.
I'm in total agreement. I see this in a lot of different ways in a lot of different areas. And one of the things that worries me is that I think youth pastors love to study the different generations and how the different generations, how ministry can change to those different generations. This may be a unique time when youth pastors need to spend a little bit of time on this new generation, but also need to spend a lot of time on their generation as to understanding how their leadership will not necessarily attract this alpha generation if they don't make some changes.
Yeah. That's good, man. We should probably come back to that at some point in another episode after we learn some more things about it. So knowing that these next generations do want to make a difference, they want to make an impact. I think, from your perspective, you're sold out to student leadership, have been for probably most of your life. Why do you think, I guess, why is it so important that student leadership becomes such a big thing in our ministry? And then we'll talk about like, where we go from there. But why student leadership?
Participants versus owners. When we do entertainment-based youth ministry, which we did in the 90s and early 2000s, and we're still doing somewhat, when we're doing that, students look at what we're doing and say, I like that, or I don't like that. Oh, down the street, they've got a better ski trip this winter. I'm going to go down there. And they're just participants. They never put any They never take their spiritual gift and give it away to the community of faith. They never look and see about who they can help in the youth ministry. It's all about, do I like it or not? Right.
Mm.
Owners think way differently. Owners who are sophomores, juniors, and seniors look back at the freshmen and realize, we got to get these freshmen before, they have a bad experience. We need to make this a big positive. So they commit to the youth ministry, right? They start thinking about, you know what? I'm not going to let the conversation in the small group just lag. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to talk. Hey, when the youth pastor asks if somebody will pray, as a young man, I'm putting my hand up every time.
Mm.
When leaders do that, youth ministries change drastically. So if your youth ministry is a bunch of participants, get ready to spin your wheels. You're just going to be spinning your wheels, and they're going to be asking, what are you going to do for me next? What's going to be next? What are you going to do for me?
Yeah.
Right. If you've got a group of owners in your youth ministry, they're going to be asking questions like, what do you need me to own? What do you need me to do? What do you need me to take care of? Hey, listen, think about this. How do renters treat an apartment and how do owners treat a condo? It's way different, right?
Yep.
That's the way you can look at your youth ministry. Student leadership produces owners. And owners in the kingdom of God will do more in the church serving long term than anybody else. So student leaders are church leaders. They're involved in church. They own the church now, and they're concerned about the health of the church. They're concerned about the giving at the church. They're concerned about serving, impact. All of these things become valuable to them. So I think student leadership makes a difference because it turns students from participants to owners. I don't know anything else that does, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah.
A really great summer camp is not going to make your kids owners.
Yeah.
I love summer camp. I did summer camp as a kid. I love summer, but man, that's why I love mission trips. I think mission trips and turning them into leadership labs can do more for your ministry than almost anything else can long term. Do students love summer camp? Love it. Fantastic, right? But I'm just saying, ownership, developing owners in your ministry, students that know themselves, know how God's wired them, know how God has made them unique. You've probably heard me say it, Steve, but I think students have a sneaky suspicion that they're unique. They just can't prove it.
Yeah.
But leadership development proves it to them. It proves to them that they are unique, that God has made them for a purpose and a reason. He has a mission for their life. Man, and that mission will bring them the most joy and happiness they can ever imagine. That's what I want my students to know. That's why I love leadership development. Participants complain about what they don't like. Owners change it.
Yeah. That's so good. And we've seen it. My wife and I were just talking the other day. We've had the privilege of having many students come through our ministry who are now in ministry themselves and serving in some capacity within ministry. Wouldn't that could be professional, or they're just heavily involved as volunteers. Some of them are missionaries going overseas. Some of them are doing in local church, all these different things. And we started to just take an inventory of who those students were. And every one of them were involved in leadership in some capacity. Some of them were full blown like student leaders on the student leadership team. Others were just owning a specific area of our ministry, but every one of them were owners, like you're talking about. And it's played out in the rest of their life. They're not walking away from the church once they graduate. No, they're now contributing to the overall church and the overall kingdom now as adults.
That's exciting. That's an exciting story right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
So why do so many youth leaders struggle with having student leadership then?
I think there's a lot of reasons. One is confidence. Sometimes a youth worker has not been trained in how to develop leaders. They don't feel confident that they can help develop a student as a leader. I think that's one area. I think two is oftentimes youth pastors think, hey, I'm paid to do this. If I don't do this, what are they going to think about me, right? Two or three, I don't think oftentimes youth pastors get support from church and parents to develop leaders. Oh, parents want it, but they don't actually want their students to fail in any way or shape or form.
Sure.
Right? If you can do it, if you can develop them as leaders with 100% wins, they'll be okay with it. So sometimes parents don't buy into the whole process, really. I think most of the time is that youth pastors look at leadership development as one more piece of the pie, the whole youth ministry pie. You know, I got to do retreats and I got to do camps. I got to do small groups. I've got to do a monthly social event. I have to do Sunday school. I might have to do confirmation, depending on my tradition. I've got all these things. And now you want me to add student leadership. Okay, that's one more piece of the pie. When do I have time to do that? And I think most youth workers don't have time to do that. So here's what I want to say. I don't want you to take and make another piece of the pie student leadership. I want you to make an ingredient in the pie student leadership. I want to see student leaders working on your summer camps and in your retreats. I want to see student leaders in your small groups. I want to see them in your planning your social events or your Saturday serve events or whatever you might be doing. I want to see them on the worship team. I want to see them at the snack shack. I want to see them everywhere. Make student leadership an ingredient in the pie, not another piece of the pie. And I think when youth workers have that kind of confidence to do that, oh boy, they'll develop a lot of owners.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I know you have this concept of leadership labs. You've kind of alluded to it a couple times as well. And I think the very first workshop that I ever heard you talk at, you were talking about leadership labs, and it drastically changed how I viewed leadership, because it wasn't just another program. It became an ingredient in the ministry. So yeah, if someone's listening and they want to start student leadership, they want to start, incorporating that sort of thing, would you encourage them to think about leadership labs, or is there another way to start thinking about it? Okay.
Yes. You go to my website, leadertrex.org, and there you can go to the search bar and you can search Reimagine Student Leadership. It's a free ebook on how to create leadership labs in your youth ministry. If you don't find it there, just write me, Doug@leadertrex.com, and I'll get it for you and send it to you for free. Yeah, leadership labs, 1 to 3 students with 1 adult for a short period of time, 2 to 3 months. Because if you do a student leadership team and it's for all 12 months, these students are so busy in so many other extracurricular activities, they're just going to disappear on you, right? So I like a leadership lab. So a leadership lab, I might ask a football guy to be involved in it, but I'm not going to ask him in the fall. I'm going to ask him in the spring, right? If I've got a guy who's really into the spring play, I'm not going to ask him in the spring. I'm going to ask him in the fall, right? So I'm going to structure it for the students that it really works for them in their schedule. And I'm going to give them something to do, like, hey, right now, I'll start a leadership lab for the fall retreat. And I'm looking for a few students to run all the activities at the fall retreat. So I might grab 2 students, a boy and a girl, let's say. And I ask them to commit to meeting with me twice a week for the next 2.5 months. And then one time after the fall retreat. And I ask them to commit to running all the fun events at the retreat. So I'm going to spend the next 2 to 3 months discipling them and training them, giving them a skill set on what they need to do to be able to plan and lead this part of it. And I'm going to walk through with them. I'm going to be in relationship with them. I'm going to train them. I'm going to invest a lot in them. Then they're going to run this part of the fall retreat for me. And then we're going to debrief it afterwards, talk about what we did well, what we could improve on, and 3 things that we want to work on moving forward. And we're done. And that's the leadership lab. And I can run 1 or 2 leadership labs at a time, or my adult volunteers could be running leadership labs. I see a lot of leadership labs where the worship team or the tech team or the snack shack could all be leadership labs. You could have small groups. You could have apprentices with adult small group leaders that could be doing that. I talked to a youth pastor the other day who goes through our deep discipleship program on Sunday with his students, high school students, and then they run deep discipleship on Wednesday night for preteens. They go and they run it. So, I mean, you can do a lot of different leadership labs. The thing about leadership labs is you can have lots of students involved. You get to pick the students, so there's no application, who got in and who didn't get in and all that. You can pick students when they have time and they're available. You can even get parents involved by having them sign a covenant that says, I know my student is committing to this. And it's kind of like sports team commitment or a traveling team commitment. They're making that commitment. So you can do a lot of things with a lab. You could have students in labs once a year or once during their 4 years of high school. You could have them in a lab twice during a year. You got so much flexibility of what you can do. I think leadership labs are an effective way of actually developing leaders. Because what I see with most student leadership teams is we do the 10 or 12 on the student leadership team. 3 students do all the work and 9 students hide. And they're really not developed as leaders. They're just got a position or a title. And, most students rebel against positional leadership. They don't like it. They don't like this. The idea that you're the captain of the football team or the cheerleader captain or the secretary of the sophomore class, right? Students, they know that those are all bogus, right? They know they don't mean anything. And so we don't want to have just positional leadership. We want to have real authentic leadership where students make the decisions that lead to success or failure. And then we debrief it with them and we're in it with them. We want them to grow. And so we challenge them, we encourage them. I always like to say we keep them in the growth zone. We take them out of the comfort zone. We don't put them in the panic zone. We try to keep them in the growth zone. The growth zone is where they get dependency on God and reliance on team. And when they do that, we know they're in the growth zone. So that's why I love leadership labs. And I think that's how they work and they can be wildly effective.
Yeah. I love it. And would I be able to actually put that in place? Yeah, it makes a huge difference because now you're looking at every student and their leadership potential rather than just the handful that can actually make that meeting on a regular basis. Like every
the
student.
responsible kid.
Yeah.
There's like youth pastors are always like, I can't do student leadership. My students aren't ready. I'm like, okay, so when will they be ready?
Right.
No one has ever answered that question yet, Steve. I'm still waiting for an answer for a youth pastor to give me that answer because there is no answer. Our job is not to take responsible kids and call them leaders.
Yeah.
Our job is to take non-leaders and make them leaders. That's what our role is. That's what we should be doing. That kid who thinks that they can't do anything, we gotta change that mindset. We got to change that around. We got to whisper in their ear, I see you as a leader. And then we got to train and develop them to become that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I just think about the impact that's gonna have beyond their church setting as well. I mean, like just only like thinking about like America's Got Talent and American Idol, all those people, like so often their stories are like, well, my church gave me an opportunity. And that's why I learned to sing, or that's where I learned to play an instrument or whatever. There's so many stories that said, well, my church saw some potential in me and they gave me an opportunity. And now they're leading out in more than just their church building. Now they're making an impact on the overall world. And yeah, we get the opportunity to have that impact on the next generation.
Yeah. The students don't believe in themselves. We have to believe in them more. I always say this, we gotta believe in a student's potential. That's why I always like to write in a journal a student's name and what I think their potential is in the next 10 years. Because that really helps me to think differently about that student. Because when I don't do that, all I do is focus on their behavior. And their behavior doesn't always tend to be great. But if I'm focused on their potential 10 years down the road, man, that's what I want to think about.
Yeah. Well, I want to put a little speculation hat on there. You've been in youth ministry world for a long time. Where do you see student ministry going in the future?
Oh man, I think we got a really big problem. We don't have enough youth workers.
Yeah.
And I don't see more coming. I see us losing them. So
yeah,
we just finished a new retreat curriculum called how to know you're called to ministry, right? I think we got to start making the call. I think one of the things that we have to do as a small band of committed youth workers right now is we got to start multiplying ourselves. We got to think differently about it. I think we were thinking Christian colleges were going to do it, but I think Christian colleges are in a crisis of their own. And so for so many different reasons and so many different ways that I think we now have got to start thinking about creating a bullpen of potential youth workers. And we've got to start challenging students to think about a future in youth ministry. I think there's this great ministry out there. I don't really know them. Leadership Pathway. They're a ministry I've been
Yeah.
following for a little while. I read their
Yeah.
stuff. They're
I'm,
doing some amazing work in this area.
yeah.
And I got
Yeah.
to give them shout out, man. They're awesome.
They're a good friend that works for them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're impressing me. And their whole thing, from what I understand, is helping churches create a minor league. And I think that's what we've got to do. Churches that call me today and say, Doug, I'm looking for you. I'm like, they don't exist. And if they do, their church is paying them $80,000 and they don't want to move to your location. You know, that's just the reality of it. You got to develop your own folks. And I think for churches, this is going to be a huge cultural shift. But I think churches need to be developing 2 or 3 people. They need to put money into it. They need to, and not just for themselves. They need to do it for the church down the street that can't afford it.
Amen.
We need some churches that have got a bullpen that would share it with other churches and other denominations. And we need churches that are really developing the next generation, because the Christian college isn't going to do it anymore. It doesn't look like it's feasible to charge $160,000 to get a $34,000 job when you come out. I just don't think it's feasible. So I think we got to change pay scales. I think one of the things that it seems to me that churches in the South have already figured this out. They value the youth worker a little bit more than the North. I look at some of the salaries up here. I live in the Chicagoland area. I look at some of the salaries that good sized churches are offering, and I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
You're gonna put that youth pastor on food stamps. What are you doing? But down in the South, I see that they're paying a decent $70,000, $80,000 salaries nowadays. And that's what's needed. We need to change the pay scale around. We need these young families for mom to be able to stay at home if that's what they want. We need some real mindset change. And we also need churches to think about their youth pastor not in terms of 3 years, but to think of them in terms of 9 or 10 years.
Yeah.
To really think about development. I don't know how many churches I've seen that are running ads saying, I know you're looking for a stepping stone to a better job, but would you consider being no way. Don't take that job. Churches have got to be way different in their thinking. Youth ministry is not a stepping stone. It is. Amen. I love it when I talk to so many people, like in your area, Mr. Bill, who's a lifer. Like that's my example of just a phenomenal youth worker who's in it for the long haul, like the long haul.
Yeah.
Like we might have to pull Mr. Bill out of here.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah. He'll still be doing it on like his funeral day. He'll somehow figure out how to do it. Yeah.
He'll have written notes for all of his kids in his car.
Exactly.
But anyhow, we need the lifers. We need them. We need them to be developing, and they need the resources to be able to develop another generation, because the Christian college ain't going to do it. So I think that's going to be a very big trend. I would have thought that by now churches would have gotten it, that there's nobody out there, and they haven't. And what I'm seeing more and more, almost every new youth pastor I meet, Steve, is bivocational or part-time or volunteer. I'm not meeting a lot of new full-time youth pastors, a few, but not many. So I think this is a big, huge issue. And I think that, I don't know, I think we got to get serious, but I don't think churches have felt enough pain yet. But I think when the churches really start to feel the pain, they're going to look for organizations like Leadership Pathway. And I think that'll be a big help to them.
Yeah, it's some of my research last year doing it on youth pastor longevity. And it's really hit me, because it's like we do have so many teenagers, as we've talked about, who are hungry and open to the gospel and open to faith right now. But we also have a lot of youth leaders who are bailing for one reason or the other. Like, we, as a church, we've got an issue here. We have the opportunity of potentially like a huge revival within our churches, and yet we are losing people left and right who are considering themselves dedicated to discipling that next generation. And if they're bailing, like, what are we going to do? So yeah, I'm right there with you.
I think it's a huge issue. And I just can't believe that senior pastors haven't really begun to address it yet. But I don't think they've felt enough pain yet. But when they feel enough pain, I think they will do it. This is really interesting, Steve, the thing you bring up here, because I've been fascinated about this last year of watching these revivals taking place on college campuses and high school campuses. And the one thing about these revivals that continues to make me very curious is this: these revivals are happening outside of the church.
Yeah. Yep.
That breaks my heart. Like, why
Hmm.
is that? Why is that? And I've been really thinking a lot about how do we get these revivalists into our churches, and not just into our churches, but into leadership, because
Amen.
they're highly motivated, they're highly enthusiastic, they have a deep relationship with the Lord. I think the church seems to be standoffish towards them, and
Hmm.
I'm very worried about this. But I get this: Jesus is doing His work, and He won't be stopped.
Hmm. Yeah.
I wish our churches would see this more and go, how do we come alongside of that and get involved more?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing the same thing. And I've asked myself similar questions like, okay, like the next generation wants to lead, clearly. They're feeling called, but there's a missing piece there in leadership within the actual church. I'm glad that they're feeling led to start their own organizations and start nonprofits and all these amazing things. And I think, part of me goes, okay, well, Steve, think outside the box, think outside the church. It's okay for those things to happen. But at the same time, we still have a leadership issue within the church. So how can both things start to happen? And it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Well, you look at some of these denominations, Steve, and they publish their average age of their senior pastors, and most denominations are getting very old very fast.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big problem in 25 years. Big problem.
Yeah. Well, I could keep talking about this forever.
I know.
Yeah. But I do want to address another important thing. You recently wrote another article about how a healthy ministry structure that will prevent burnout. And burnout's huge within ministry, within leadership. Can you unpack that just for us, just to help us understand, how do we actually prevent burnout in ministry? Because we want
Yeah.
to be in it for the long haul.
I think there's a couple of things that I see. One is I see most youth groups have a mission statement, but they don't have a strategy that goes with it. So the most popular one is loving God, loving students. That's great, right? But what's the strategy to get students to love God and to love other students? What's that strategy? And I think oftentimes what ends up happening, what ends up becoming our strategy, is we do what we did last year and hoping that it'll be a little bit better. So we're working really hard to make what we did last year better, and actually attendance keeps dropping. And so we're frustrated by that. We see that we're doing all this work and we're not seeing the results.
Mm.
And I think oftentimes it's because we don't have a really well articulated, simple strategy. So the simple strategy that I think really works is this: you got to have adults that want to build meaningful relationships with students, not just adults that want to flip burgers and drive vans. They want to build relationships with students. Key. Second of all, is you got to have programming that fits into three categories. Reach, grow, go is my basic terms. Use a lot of other terms out there, but there's only three things we do in youth ministry: reach lost students, help students grow in Christ, and send students out to go and use their gifts. Most churches have this strategy, but not a lot of programming fits this strategy. So if you have this strategy, take every one of your programming elements and ask yourself, is the main purpose of that reach? Is it the main purpose grow, or is the main purpose go? What I find is that most youth pastors have the same purpose for every event. All three of those things: reach, grow, go. Good example, midweek programming. We start by throwing rubber balls at each other because that brings people to Jesus, we think. And then we break into small groups, and there's a talk, and we break into small groups, and adult volunteers say things like, give me 5 minutes and I'll get through this. And then we go and we do worship time, and the worship time is student led. And so we go, that's our go time. And we went from reach, grow, go in an hour and a half. And all we did was confuse our students and our adult volunteers as to what the purpose was, which drives them to the side of the room. So what I really encourage youth pastors to do is to have a purpose. This is a reach event. This is a grow event. This is a go event for us. And to articulate that in your announcements. Every time you stand up, hey, you guys, come midweek. This is our reach event. Bring your friends. We promise to make it great. Hey, you guys, our fall retreat this year is a grow event. If you're coming, you're bringing your Bible, you're coming focused, and you want to grow. Hey, if you're just coming for that girl, don't come. Set the standard high. This is a grow event. We want you to grow, right? Go events. We're going to Saturday serve. We're going to be serving over at Miss Linda's house. We're raking her leaves. Come prepared for that. We're going to have 2 student leaders in charge. It's going to be great. If you can make announcements that are your strategy every week, you are going to be not spinning your wheels. You're going to get traction. You're going to move, right? And then you got to have a discipleship plan. You got to really have a process. If you ask your adults, how do you disciple a student and no one can answer, you got a problem. Or if you get 10 different answers, you got a problem, right? You got to come up with a process to do discipleship, and everybody's got to be in that same process. It creates common language. It allows for you to train them. It allows for everybody to celebrate the wins. It's really great. Have a process for discipleship. And then, 4, you got to partner with parents. You got to have a strong partnership with parents. They are the primary faith influencers. You're coming along to support them, and you better have a plan to meet their needs. Because if you don't begin to meet your parents' greatest needs, they're not going to care about youth ministry, and you're going to be a priority just below travel baseball, right? You don't need to prioritize parents by finding out what their needs are and meeting their needs. And then finally, student leadership. Be developing leaders. Developing leaders in your ministry will do more for your ministry than almost anything else. Turning students into leaders, that creates culture. And when a freshman walks in and they see the culture, they'll get it and they will follow that culture. But if they walk in and they see apathetic juniors and seniors, they're going to follow that culture too. Yeah. So you don't want to follow that culture. So you got to really think about this. But there's just 5 things I would do. I would have adults that want to build meaningful relationships with students. I'd have programming that had purpose. I would have a process for discipleship. I would partner with parents at a very aggressive level, and I would develop student leaders. And if you do that, I believe your youth ministry will have huge impact and will grow quickly.
So good. Doug, I feel like we just had a masterclass on how to run a strong student ministry. And so I hope everybody is listening and maybe they're taking notes. They're going to hopefully follow up with you and do all those things. But before we do wrap up, I just want to give you an opportunity to just share anything that God has put on your heart, any encouragement that you have for our podcast audience.
This last week, we had students in Milwaukee serving, and there was a girl there who had just been baptized right before she came on the missions trip, and she was on fire for the Lord. They were walking through City Hall in Milwaukee, and she sees a bunch of people come out of a room, and someone says, Mayor, can I get a quote from you? And she's like, "Ooh, that's the mayor of Milwaukee." She goes up to the mayor of Milwaukee, and she says this, "Hey, Mayor, would you mind if I prayed for you?" So the mayor stopped, looked at her, is like, "You betcha." And so she laid hands on this mayor and prayed for him. From the baptism pool to that in 1 week, our students can do more than we think they can do. Our students can be involved in things that we can't even imagine, and they can have impact in ways we can't imagine. So trust your students, challenge your students, push your students out of their comfort zone. Start challenging them to grow and to do more than maybe their parents think is possible. But let's go. Let's get these students moving, and let's stop thinking that what they want is to be coddled. Let's start thinking about challenging them to get into God's word. Let's start challenging them to learn how to pray. Let's start pushing forward. We can complain about a lot of things, but I'm just telling you, our students can do way more than you think. And let's challenge them and let's see them do it.
Yeah. Amen. I'm ready to go. Doug, I know people are going to want to follow up with you, maybe have some more conversations with you, find out all about Leader Treks. Where can they find you online?
Doug at leadertreks.com. You can write me. I'm available to talk almost not every day, but almost every day. I meet with youth pastors. I got an appointment in 15 minutes with a youth pastor, and I do it for free. You can hang out with me. We can talk about what's going on in your ministry. We can talk about challenges you're facing in your family. I know they can do the same with you and many of our NNYM brothers and sisters that are serving in those roles as well too. But I'm here to help, and you don't have to pay a thing. Everybody at Leader Treks is a youth pastor or former youth pastor, and anybody who answers the phone is ready to help you. And we got great people here, but you can always reach out to me. You can also go to my YouTube channel. There's a lot of trainings on the YouTube channel. They're all free. There's trainings in our deep discipleship blogs for your adult volunteers if you want to grab those. All free. We probably got 50 freebies on our website. If you just search the freebie button, you can find a ton of stuff there. So any way you want, but I'm here to help. You can reach out to me. I answer the phone part of the time here at Leader Trucks too. You might just call the number, I might answer. But if I don't, Kelly or Angie or somebody else will answer and they'll help you and they get you to me. But I'm here. Just reach out. I'm happy to spend an hour chatting about whatever you want to talk about.
Cool. Doug, I so much appreciate you for your friendship, but also all that you have done and you continue to bring to the youth ministry world. Such a wealth of wisdom and resources, and so grateful for your friendship, but also that we can hang out today for an hour and chat about youth ministry.
Yeah. It's always fun. It's always fun to be with you. I don't know if we're going to be up at Refuel in Colorado Springs this fall. I'm so far behind on this stuff.
Yeah.
But if I don't, I hope I get to hang out with you at a conference or something.
Yeah, that'd be good. It'll be a weird, fall not to be hanging out with you in Colorado Springs, but
I know, I just love that church, Rocky Mountain Calvary.
Yeah.
They're so awesome up there. Tim is like the greatest youth worker in the world.
That's great. Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get a chance to be up there this year.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Doug, and pray that God continues to bless you and all your ministry.
Hey, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on today.
Doug has so much wisdom. I could seriously talk to him all day long. And if you're like me, you've probably been taking a lot of notes, or maybe you're planning to come back to this episode and listen again and take better notes. If you did enjoy this episode, can you do a few things for me? First, take a moment to leave us a positive review on your podcast app of choice, and then share this episode with someone else in student ministry. You may not realize it, but those two things really help this podcast in getting into more youth leaders' hands and ears, but it also helps me to get on more great guests like Doug. So thanks in advance for rating and sharing. And if you'd like to do more than that, please consider joining my prayer and financial partnership team. You can find the links in the show notes or at studentministryconnection.com. Your generosity helps make this podcast happen, but it also helps me in the rest of my ministry with National Network of Youth Ministries. And if you're looking for a speaker for your next youth group event, camp, retreat, or training, check out the Speaker Hub at youthmenhub.com/speakerhub. Again, all of the links that we mentioned in this episode will be available in the podcast show notes. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe on your podcast app or on YouTube so you don't miss out on upcoming episodes. And until next time, be sure to stay connected and may God bless your ministry.